Okay, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll cover a few broad areas and few specific areas as well. The topic, as you see, it's kind of talking about primarily innovation for product managers to handle various roadblocks. But the fulcrum or the area of focus would be how really do you have various opportunities around the product itself as an innovation fulcrum, and then how do you really drive growth? Nitin, let's go to the next one. Yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm the head of product at Ola, working both on mobility and the EV side of things. So I've done last couple of years in product, and before that, significant years in consulting. So I'll try to make it more relevant to product-led growth. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, so feel free to post the question in the Q&A section so that we can take those things later, and as and when we go the next 30 minutes or so. Yeah.
Few words from our side as well. So thank you so much for being a part of this, Ramakant, especially pulling out the time from your schedule and also giving us this opportunity. So
Sure.
we have a good session today. And yeah, thank you for being a part of it.
Sure, love to. Let's go to the agenda slide quickly, just to run few areas that we are going to talk about in the next 30 minutes. What we'll just talk about how exactly a product-led approach typically helps in product excellence and what exactly a product-led organization look like. Then we'll talk about how we can leverage data to build great products. And then obviously everyone here might have already worked on product management or might want to get into that career. So how do you really deliver a product in a different way? It's not rocket science, it's both art and science, but there are a few areas that you need to look at. So we'll talk about briefly that. And then how do you really leverage product as a tool to drive customer success? Because at the end of it, what matters is whether the customers are finding any value using the product that you are shipping out for them to. Yeah, so let's just get into it. When we talk about product-led approach for delivering excellence, the first thing that I want to talk about is being product-led is essentially meaning it's not a side thing that you do on a regular basis, but it is about making all the functions and departments that you have and how they can leverage the product in different ways. So before getting into the details, what exactly a product-led organization look like? It's essentially using the product that you have. When we say product, just to clarify, primarily it is applicable for any kind of product. It could be a hardware or it could be a software, but the context of what we are talking about right now in this discussion would be primarily catering to the software side of product management. So in a product-led org, product is essentially the primary vehicle to acquire, activate, and retain users. The primary mission is to solve the user's pain point by catering to the best product that you can really build. So instead of making decisions based on what exactly you feel or the company perceives to be there, the primary thing that a product-led org look at is the consumer behavior data, the direct feedback that you get from the consumers, and how do you really leverage the data or the synthesis of those things to overcome the shortcomings that you have. So building a successful product-led growth takes literally three broad areas, I would say. The first is about an organization that must understand the value it delivers to the users or the customers. Secondly, the value that needs to be effectively communicated to the organization, because internally also as an org and the employees of the org need to understand what exactly as a product that you're going to deliver. And finally, that needs to be a marriage between what exactly you want to deliver versus what the customer wants. So transitioning from a sales to a product-led strategy requires a transformation of the entire org, and it requires a lot of teamwork. Let's just look at in the next slide, what exactly are the various characteristics, if we can put that, for a product-led org. So the first is about aligning various functional goals around the product. The second would be about data-driven. I'll talk about each of these things briefly. Second is about data-driven decision-making rather than taking a guesswork, as I talked about. The third one is about using the product as a marketing channel rather than, you would have different channels to do marketing, but then how do you really leverage the product as a marketing tool so that you can directly reach out to the consumers or the users that are using the product? The next one is about delivering a great onboarding experience. This is particularly true for the B2B application, though it is also greatly applicable for the B2C application that you might be using on a daily basis. The next one is about incorporating the feedback, which is really, really important. because when we are talking about feedback incorporation in any kind of product, that is valuable in a way that because you want to build something that is needed rather than you want to build something because you want to build something for the sake of building something. So that's where the product feedback from the consumers is really, really important there. And the final one is the focus on consumer self-service. So the importance of customer self-service is essentially about understanding the users to help them drive the growth within the product, or essentially how to help them navigate various pain points within the product. So primarily, how do you do that? If I were to, put a single theme around all of the 6 areas, is about understanding a jobs to be done framework. So it's a very simple framework, like the primary things that you want to do as a product manager to deliver the consumers to solve the pain points that you want to solve for, and there is a secondary jobs to be done. So primarily it has 3 or 4 components. The one first being the functional components, which is essentially, let's say you are ordering something on Swiggy or Zomato. The primary function is about enabling the users to order something on the application. Then there are emotional aspects of it, like the feelings and the perception about the functional aspects. So exactly, for example, can you elicit a behavior within the consumers that they're really taking pride in using an application like that, and that is solving a real problem that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then there is a social dimension to it. So do they really look smart in front of their peers or maybe the friends? So if a product is really elevating that kind of experiences from the users, then probably you have delivered the best product out there in the same category that you are offering as compared to the competitors out there. Yeah, let's go to the next one. I'm just going a bit fast given that we have limited time here, but I'll definitely take all the questions you might have. Now let's talk about how to really leverage data to build great products. So if we talk about data, let's go to the next slide, Nitin, please. Yeah, product team you really need to know 3 very simple things: what the users want, what would they say when they have used the product once or multiple times, and then what do they do really with the product. If you want to understand and really deliver a very simple product in a way which is going to cut down a lot of the ad hoc tasks on the pain points that the consumers face on a day-to-day basis, you really need to think about these 3 areas. And then how do you really decide how to measure this thing? So primarily to do that, there are a couple of areas. Nitin can just put a click. Oh, I think you're sharing the wrong slide, but yeah, okay. So in terms of the case study that we're talking about here, might be there is a mistake in the slide, but primarily the kind of thing that we want to talk about in terms of measurement is about how do you identify the key questions that you want to answer, because unless you understand what exactly you need to measure, then you cannot deliver the great value. And to understand what to measure, you really need to answer the question, what exactly the customers want? And then from their question, there will be stemming questions regarding what exactly will be the quantitative and qualitative metrics that the organization can really talk about or measure, so that you can really measure the success and the growth of the product in the future. So one of the key case studies that I've pointed out here is the LabCorp, where they really had issues about a lot of consumer experience, but the primary thing that they want to deliver is a personalized experience. So they have identified 2 issues which were having a really outsized impact on the onboarding, and they determined that these issues were generating a lot of high volume support tickets. So what they did was essentially a product-led approach to deliver and measure the success of those fixes that they released, which really led to the frictionless support, which is essentially one of the ones that I talked about, which is the self-service ways of helping customers help themselves. That reduced the entire tickets from more than thousands to under 100 over the next couple of months. And also it kind of, the ticket backlog reduced almost by 99%. So then how do you really decide what are the things that you want to talk about is before a pre-launch versus a large corp that differs? Because when you talk about a small startup, maybe with not more than 1 million users, then the kind of things that you want to measure would be entirely different for a company like, let's say, Microsoft and Google, where they're primarily a B2B company in various gamuts like cloud, B2C, and also in terms of payments and lots of other things that they have. So it also varies, depends on over the evolvement of time. So if you want to measure something over 3 months versus a 6 months period versus 3 years period, the kind of thing that you want to measure also varies. So you have to be mindful about what is the product that you are leading to in terms of growth or maybe adoption. And based on that, the phase in which the product is there, you can really define a matrix that you want to really measure over the period of time. Let's go to the next one. I think you can skip the next one because I think that is covered here. Yeah, let's go to the next slide, the KPI slide. Yeah. So in terms of KPIs, primarily in the KPIs, you can talk about three broad categories. One is the business outcome, which is essentially something that you really want to measure in terms of the top line growth, because it's most of the time this organization is profitable. So you need to understand how exactly the product is helping you drive those broader company goal, either in terms of revenue or number of customer acquisition. The second is about product usage. And the third is about product quality. So we will talk about all of these three areas. These are essentially few, I call it 10 KPIs, but then there could be 12, that could be 20, that could be 5. It all depends on which is applicable to which product. But broadly, if you look at this 10 KPIs, this would cover a lot of those products out there in both B2C and B2B category. I'll just quickly cover the 3 or 4 important ones here. The first one is about net revenue retention, which is really, really critical because this kind of helps you understand whether how much revenue that you essentially are retaining for each of the existing customers. So the way to calculate is you can calculate it by using a monthly recurring revenue for the last month. And you top it up with the upsell and cross-sell that you do for additional revenue. But then you have to also be mindful of the revenue lost due to the downsell and the churn. So that kind of gives you a net quantitative metrics to understand on a monthly basis or quarterly basis how much the net revenue that you are making. This is a very good indicator in terms of the financial health of the product. The second is adoption. I'm sure a lot of you might have heard about this term adoption in a lot of other contexts. It's almost similar here as well, which is essentially expressed over a time of maybe a monthly active user or daily active user, which kind of helps you understand whether the consumers for which you have built the product, they're using the product and there is a particular adoption in specific segment or not. Then that kind of gives you understanding based on the segmentation that you might have done initially, if you want to do any kind of product changes so that the active usage of the product over a monthly, weekly or daily basis is going to grow. And then there are other proxies also. You can talk about the number of features which generates maybe X percentage of clicks. That's typically done in a lot of those B2B cases where, let's say, you have launched a few features and then you want to understand whether those features have been adopted or not. Then you have to see out of the 5 features that we have launched, maybe 90% of the clicks is being generated by only 3 features. And that kind of helps you understand which of these areas of features that we have launched have got more adoption versus the other ones, because that gives you a credibility in terms of what you have done is right or not. Or at the same time, you also want to look at in a different lens to understand whether you want to deprecate some of the features that you have rolled out because they are not being used or adopted by the users. The third one is the stickiness or the repeat behavior, I would call it. It's about how many active users on a monthly basis or weekly basis return to your portal on a daily basis. Again, this varies because if you talk about a channel or a product like, let's say, Zoom, on which we are talking now, there's a B2B product. It might not be something that you want to use on a daily basis. But the same is not true for software like, let's say, WhatsApp or maybe Google Pay or Phone Pay, etc., which is something maybe you are using on a daily basis. So the timeline over which you want to measure the stickiness varies, again, based on the context and the product you talk about. But it essentially gives you a good understanding whether the users keep coming back to the product whenever there is a need for a specific solution for which they are using the product for. Growth is essentially very standardized in terms of any standard growth matrix. It's like you want to understand how many additional users you are maybe adding to the platform or your portfolio of users over the period of time. You typically calculate using the total number of new users over a period of time, then the total number of recovered users. Recovered users are the users who might have installed, but they might not have used for a lot of for the last couple of months or weeks based on the product scope. And then you might have, reactivated them using some marketing tactics. And then you have to divide that total number with total number of dropped users who probably have, uninstalled your application or they've not been using for the X number of days. That is a timeline you have to define. That kind of tells you the net effect of the user acquisition and retention efforts. So where you would want to talk about growth, then this kind of gives you those areas or leverage points where you can talk about whether my acquisition is a problem or a retention is a problem. Then you can specifically talk about those areas and then have your strategies to deploy within the product itself, either a product improvement area or maybe a marketing kind of thing which for retention. The fifth one, which is one of my favorites, product engagement score. It is one of the very easy to understand metrics in my view, because it's a composite metrics and it is kind of an average of all the three ones that we talked about: adoption, stickiness, and growth. And then this is a single go-to metrics for me to report success. So it kind of helps you also understand where to improve. So if we are talking about the average of adoption, stickiness, and growth over, let's say, 6 months of period, and your product engagement score is, let's say, out of 100 is 82, and maybe for the last couple of quarters it was above 90, then you can really see which of these three areas of adoption, stickiness, and growth is really impacting the overall PES score and driving down the number. And then you can deep dive on those things. So that is where I really love this metrics PES, because this is going to help you at any point of time talk about the overall growth and maybe health of the product as a whole. The next one is retention. It essentially measures the percentage of users still use the product after they have initially installed. Typically, there are two types of retention. One is the user retention, which are the end users, and there are the customer retention, which is primarily applicable for B2B, which is the account level, like in terms of how many new accounts that you have added, so that the overall growth in terms of revenue and number of users is being maintained at a level in which the business would want it to be. Think of it retention as inverse sum churn, like how much you have retained versus how much you are really churning over a period of time. In terms of app retention, how many users continue to use your app during a given time. And then there are also feature retention. As I said, like let's say you have rolled out few features, and then that gives an understanding of which features keep your users returning to your application and helps you identify those users who are at risk. And then you can further segment also in terms of feature retention by the role, maybe the company size, whether it's B2B or B2C, or whether the users are free versus paid, or maybe the premium ones. Based on that also, again, you can deep dive and have your tactics to address the retention issues you might have. The next one is time to value. It measures the amount of time from which they have started using the product until the point they drive value. We call it the aha moment. So it's essentially the efforts that you put for the first time they use till the point they see, hey, why exactly I'm using the product. The time to value, if it is small, then definitely the way you have developed the product, launched the product, or maybe you have interacted with the customer during the entire consumer journey is really efficient. So that gives you area, because if it's longer, then a lot of the time what happens is people, the customers, they drop off. They don't really see the value they have been using because they just got to know about the product, but then since they're not seeing any value, they'll drop off. So your primary attention would be to how do you really reduce this time to value thing, so that people, the customers, really see the value at the smallest amount of time, so that the product is simple to use. The next is NPS, which is one of the maybe most common ways. Irrespective of you are there in product management or not, NPS is pretty common, which is essentially a one question survey on recommendation on a scale of 0 to 10, and then through this, it's very simplified it can be argued to be one of the very simplified metrics, but it still is very pervasive KPI, because this kind of tells you whether someone using the product is going to refer your product to someone else, because that is one of the organic ways of growing your product. Typically, the way it is done is number of promoters, which are essentially the 9s and 10s of the survey. You subtract that from the number of detractors, which is like 1 to 6, and then you divide by the total number of respondents, which is pretty standard. The last two, these are more qualitative ones, but still the top features requested and the product performance, these are really, really important, because that way, these are really the matrix which is going to help you develop your product roadmap going forward and help you immensely in the prioritization. Unless you understand that what are the areas within the overall product that you are delivering, the key important areas, then you would not know what exactly to build next, or maybe what are the areas that you want to double down, so that the errors or the bugs, there are a lot of other things or issues are generating, you can really address those things by looking at the top features requested and the product performance. Performance is essentially downtime, uptime, the number of bugs that's there, and the way that you have resolved it over the period of time. I know it's a lot digest, but and feel free to just drop in your questions and I'll address that later. Let's go to the next area, which is essentially, I'll just briefly talk about how to deliver product in a unique way. Primarily, in a perfect world, every feature is immediately and probably enthusiastically adopted by every customer, but in reality, that's not the case. And that's probably rarely the case. But, so as we add users and personas and our products become more feature-rich in terms of the period of time as it evolves, then the launch communications, they have to really evolve, which means rethinking the way we educate and enable our users to use the product. So there are multiple ways you can do it. Could there be a guided tour when you open up an application, or maybe a pop-up message? When you hover over a button, it could be a product-led strategy to update the users on the new features. So you don't really want to send any kind of email or message which is going to sit in their email and nobody is going to care about those emails. But then if somebody is using the product, how can you really use the product itself to let them know what are the things that you have done newly, which is going to help them in a different way. The other is also internal. When you want to launch or deliver a product, you really would want to be mindful of the support team or the internal team, because if you want to, I mean, you have launched few features which are new, and there would be consumer or customer confusions around it. So there'll be support tickets or some kind of challenges which is going to coming back to as a feedback. So if the internal teams are not aligned in terms of what are the things that we have done, there will be no way they can respond to the customer. So it is kind of both ways. So once you really communicate the way you'd want to in a very effective and simple way within the product to the consumers, at the same time, you want to make sure that there is internal alignment in terms of what are the things that might be there, which the support team or similar other functions can expect when the new feature is going to get launched. The best way to deliver product announcement is best to directly just put them in the product, because somebody is opening up the application, it's bound for them to just look at that. And then how do you do that? There are different tactics around it. As I talked about, it could be a pop-up, it could be a messaging, it could be a highlighting button, a lot of other things that you can do. There is no one size fits all on how to announce the feature, but there are a couple of considerations you definitely can do. The two important ones are relevance. So which feature is relevant to what type of users, and then you make the announcement tailored to that. You cannot just put every time the same way of communicating. So here the segmentation of users in terms of frequency, in terms of users pattern is really important. The second is the desired action. So once you have communicated, what exactly do you want the consumers to do? Should they just read the documentation, something that you have maybe launched or rolled out recently? Do you really want them to try it out? Do you want them to provide feedback? So it has to be really clearly called out the way you would want to communicate, and making sure to deliver the highly relevant time. So it need not necessarily mean that somebody sitting in India may be getting the same pop-up at the same time when somebody maybe in Western world is getting, because they may be sleeping at that point of time. So there is no point of giving that pop-up at that point of time. So the relevance of times is also critical when you are launching and maybe announcing feature announcement within the product to the consumers. Let's go to the next one. So beyond the launch, there are a couple of areas that you want to talk about, which you need to be considering. One is the breadth of adoption. When I say breadth of adoption, it essentially shows the initial appeal of any kind of new feature that you launch. So what percentage of the users have adopted the feature is essentially the breadth of adoption you need to understand. That kind of helps you also measure the success of the new things that you have launched recently. Then the time to adopt. How does it really take for the users to use the feature? The more quickly they can really use or really understand what you want them to do in the new feature, the more likely it is solving a pressing need. or else maybe you need to rethink the way you have presented the new feature might not be aligned to the consumer's need in the real world. And then the final one is the duration of adoption. Here, how long do the users continue to use the feature? So a lot of the time, what you would see is, since it's a new feature, a lot of excitement would be there in the consumer's base across segments, maybe, or maybe in specific segments. And then over the period of time, maybe weeks or months time, it kind of dies down. So is it really any real value beyond the original idea we are delivering? If not, maybe it is better to just, as I said in one of the earlier slides, it's better to just deprecate some of those features, because maybe it is just cluttering the entire thing. And then based on the usage pattern from the data analytics, you need to understand what are the things that you don't want to really deliver, because it is not being used, probably because there is no value to it for any of the consumers that are using the product for. Let's go to the last section, which is essentially how do you really use product to drive customer success. So here, there are a couple of consideration. Primarily, customer success represents literally the eyes, ears, and heart of the product-led organization, and it requires really a data-driven approach. So when product-led CS teams, they have a couple of areas that I really want to talk about, which is probably you can read the slides what is written there, but broadly what the consumer success or customer success look like, they really share a unified view of the customers. So when you talk about any kind of organization, they really need to collaborate with the other departments, maybe some kind of single system of record, so that gives everyone the single source of truth about the consumers or the behavior they have shown over the period of time by using the product. The second one is about using a qualitative and quantitative data. For me, using data to have more strategic decisions with the customer is really important, because if there are lagging adoption or maybe a recurring feature request stemming from a product issue, then crafting the appropriate messaging is really important. You need to understand where exactly are these issues stemming from, and then you can intervene at the right point of time. The next one is about leverage product as a communication tool, as we have talked about in a couple of the other slides. Beyond all the other traditional ways of communicating, channel on how to communicate with the customers. It could be in-app messaging, it could be self-help tours, etc. But then it improves the relevancy and efficacy, because anyone who is using the product, they're bound to see those things, and that kind of helps you drive those customer success and the intent of the new features or the things that you would want to do now. The next one is segmentation, which is really important for personalizing the experience, because you don't really, in this current age, you don't want to just launch a feature and show the relevance for each of the user segment in the same way, because for few users, maybe 30% or 40%, there's a very rough estimate, maybe 40% of the features are really important of the overall product suite, but then beyond those 40%, the remaining are good to have, and they cater to different needs for different segments of customers. So only if you have the segmentation done right, you can really deliver those personalized experiences across these segments for any kind of feature that you're going to launch in the future. In terms of product-led onboarding is one of the other key areas I want to talk about when we are talking about customer success, because helping new customers become proficient in your product by leveraging the product itself is really a very powerful tool, and it gives the personalized experience because users really stay focused. This immersive. So let's just use the self-service mode. And that's where I want to focus. If one of the initial slides we talked about, self-service is one of the key components, where one of the examples being Citrix. If you guys know, that's one of the cloud sharing platform. So they really use product usage data to deliver the self-service guided onboarding. That kind of helped them drive more than, I guess, 30% increase in conversion. That is because they want to make sure that the users, when they are landed on the page, on the product itself, on the landing page, they are helping them understand the new things, and the way they would want to drive is showing them guided tours. So primarily empowering users is various ways, essentially engaging with the training content. It could be about reducing the support ticket volume. It could be about the long-term retention. But all of this thing is really encompassing the fact that we want to make sure that the customer is really getting the value out of it, as we already talked about it. So just to make sure that I'm just wrapping it up, whatever we just talked about in the last 20, 25 minutes, All of this thing, when you would want to put in action in whatever field in terms of product management that you are doing, it could be a B2B or B2C. The first thing you have to do is assess the current onboarding journey through the lens of a customer experience. So just understand that if you were a customer, how do you really, as a new customer, get introduced to the product? And it's the functionality that you want them to try. What data do you have about the new engagement or the new user engagement and retention to assess the effectiveness on onboarding? Because this is really critical, because the first time you want them to see the product, that is probably the most critical part, which is going to help them remember the product going forward, and also helping them coming back to the product whenever they are going to hit with the same issue for which they're using the product in the first place. The second is think about how new and existing customer get information about the product, which is about the marketing. Do they perceive communication within the product itself, or do they have to rely on their inboxes and the live support team for that thing, which is essential? How do you really simplify and make sure that the customers are not really getting worked up about how to use the product for new feature, and even for the first time itself, it's a new thing in the market. Let's say ChatGPT is one of the examples, maybe fresh on everyone's mind. So assuming ChatGPT is an application somewhere everyone can use, can it really help you on a guided tour how to use ChatGPT? That would be probably one of the easiest way to do that, rather than letting customers read maybe, I don't know, thousands of documentation pages on their website, which is there on how it is developed and how is the usefulness of the product for everyone. And then the third one would be about, obviously, consider how you might want to get the consumer experience efficiently done, including all the support function that's there. So that's my, probably a very super abridged version of how do you really use product as an innovation tool to bridge a lot of the roadblocks that you would encounter. I'm sure here in this session, there will be folks who are new to product management who might have significant experiences. So a lot of this thing, it's open for discussion, and there is no specific ways of doing things. These are again coming from experiences that I've had in my life. But then having said that, there are definite ways that we just talked about in terms of KPIs, in terms of how do you really onboard customers, specific tactics you can definitely use in both the B2B and B2C settings. Nathan, I'd like to hand it over to you. And unless there are questions, I'll be happy to take any of these questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramakant. That was a wonderful webinar that you actually conducted. We had a lot of learning into this. And maybe the viewers who are seeing this also would have learned a lot. Let us take the time for Q&A. Before that, I would like to cover up the part where we come to a picture when we talk about this entire area where there is a lot of demand, as well as there's a lot of lack of knowledge that's also provided in the country. So when we talk about this particular product management postgraduate certification from IIM, this is the 10th batch that we're doing. If I call ourselves as a market pioneers, I wouldn't be wrong, because this is the only program in the country which gives you a hands-on experience from day one. Because see, we do understand that theoretically based learning is a part of our Indian education system, but until and unless you're practically kind of put against it, right, you wouldn't be able to know what actually happens in a professional life, right? So we keep it cut short, clear, to the point. It's going to be a 6 months durated program, and these are going to be live instructor-led sessions for Saturday and Sunday, because it's highly focused on people who are working professionals. So we take an average of 8 to 22 years, and people who are also starting up their career, it is even more bigger for them because they will get themselves placed. So early to start is early to settle. That's what we call it. And also in terms of understanding the concept, so the BYOP is our trademark, which is bring your own product. So we allow the learner to enter the program with their own product or a concept, so that the end-to-end life cycle that they would be learning will be based on that, so that they also understand it better, retain the knowledge for a later period of time. And also the application of this knowledge, even at a far stage of their career, would be easier when they understand it practically. So that's how this program goes on. And in terms of the faculty, we have a bunch of Fortune 500 consultants as industry experts who share the hands-on experience knowledge. And on the other hand side, we also have people who are full-time IIM faculty. No IIM in the country gives you a full-time IIM faculty. So we have that as well. So if someone wants to get onto a product manager's role, where a good example is Mr. Ramakant, who's sitting with us today. So there is a number of opportunities out there in the market. And depending on your skill and the vision that you have on your mind, you can go and get your goal. And before it's too late, we do have multiple areas of financial assistance also available. So do get in touch, and we will help you to cater a good product management lifecycle ahead. And Ramakant, personally to you, if you have any of your colleagues and people who are also with you, and people who are aspirants to get onto product management, do give it a try about this program, because this is the only program in the country that actually sets apart itself. And people like you talking about this would also spread a lot of awareness. So I would also request you that.
Yeah.
On that note, thank you
Sure.
so much. And any questions, I think Afia will take it, or Irshad.
Yeah, thanks, Nitin. Just as anyone might want to post the question, as I said, I mean, these areas that we just talk about product management, these are not something that we really can deep dive a lot in terms of, I mean, within 30 minutes of time, definitely not. I would have loved to, gotten into details of using a case study, but given that we had limited of time, I had to rush through few of the areas. But at the same time, I would happy to connect to anyone beyond this thing offline also, if you want to connect and discuss anything on product management in general, beyond product-led growth also. Having said that, I would love to, I mean, since we have a couple of more minutes, would love to respond to any of the questions you might have.
I don't know if the questions have been posted on this platform or something else. We have also provided the connectivity between you and the learners as well. So if there's something
Sure.
they would, and Afia, I would, if there's anything that's come up, if Mr. Ramakant can answer them.
Unfortunately, we don't have any questions as of now.
Sure.
Anybody, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask here. Else we'll wrap up this session in next 1 minute. Zubair, you asked a question. Yes, we'll be sharing the recording with everybody. Looks like no questions are coming. So,
all right.
So wrap then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramakant. Hope to connect with
sure.
you soon. It
Yeah,
was
sure.
good actually hosting you. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. This is really helpful for me also to talk about this concept, and I would have enjoyed more if this would have been a more engaging discussion. But yeah, as I said, I mean, feel free to connect with me offline also, or maybe we can have more and more follow-up session on this to discuss more on, I mean, any of these areas of product management or any of the other areas.
Sure, I do have multiple questions. I would personally quote you them, and we
Sure,
can also stay in touch. Yeah? Thank you so much,
Sure.
Ramakant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Afia.
Thank you so much, Ramakant. Thank you, Nitin. Thanks for your time, and thank you everybody for attending the session today. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Bye.
Good evening. Bye-bye.